Yes, we are back once again for another episode of everyone's favourite podcast in Sorare Stratosphere. It is End Product. It is episode 82, and as always, I'm joined by my sparring partner, Quinny. How you doing, mate?
Good, mate. I'm good. Good week to get prepped for it. It feels like finally we've got some options to toy around with this weekend. There's a lot more leagues back. Not quite everything yet, but yeah, feeling good. We're going to be back on the trail and getting some old EP, getting some old End Products this weekend for sure, mate.
Fingers crossed for that. Yeah, I managed to scrape in a couple of rewards actually, in terms of like cards. Been quite fortunate on the thresholds again. The weekend just gone, but I managed to pick up two super rares, a tier 4 and a tier 5. One of them quite useful. Let me just get into the gallery and remind myself of their exact names. But one of them was a goalkeeper. He's currently a sub goalkeeper. He's back up at Coventry. So I've been looking into seeing if I'm going to get much use out of him. I've kind of put a few tweets out, but Ben Wilson's his name. He kind of was the number one goalkeeper at Coventry earlier in the season. Seems to have lost his place from the information I've been able to find. Did start in the cup recently though, so I wondered, is that him edging his way back in, or is that him well and truly second in the string of goalkeepers there? According to a few Coventry fans and watchers who hit me up on Twitter, thank you guys, he's not likely to get in anytime soon, but because he's got that low L15 at the moment, it's 18, but a few more game weeks, if he doesn't play, he'll become one of those 0 players. And as we've discussed before, don't mind having a 0 goalkeeper who maybe, if he gets a move in the summer, might become useful. If not, even using him in cap 220s, cap 240s, he might be all right once he gets that 0. And the other one was forward. He plays in the second tier in Spain at Albacete, Juanma forward. Scores are not fantastic, but he does play on and off, so who knows, might get some use out of him in those, especially with La Liga 2 players. I find you get a little bit of utility through international break, don't you? Because that tends to continue. So yeah, not too displeased with that as far as tier 4 and 5 go. Nothing that spectacular, but they could come in handy at some point.
Nice. I got a wee bit of End Product at the weekend. I finished in the top 30 in under 23 Rare Pro. I've not really played. I think it's the first time I've maybe played Pro under 23 this season. I didn't go back through all my game weeks to really check. I started and then I was like, this is just going to be impossible. It's just going to take me forever. I didn't bother. And I got a little Arthur Tiate, who's been quite handy this year, quite a spiky little under 23 defender. I traded them out for a 3D Mike Noroki of Celtic. So obviously the kind of number one backup centre back certainly at the moment. Maybe the threat to Scales, or maybe the heir to Carter Vickers' injuries. So managed to just trade him in just as a wee, just get him into the gallery kind of thing. So yeah, a little kind of whet of the appetite, I think, End Product wise, coming out the old winter break. And all the chat now, Stishy Boy, is all about End Product. It's all about where we're going to find those wins on the leaderboard. What does winning look like? What's winning all about? And everything in between. We've been chatting a lot about rivals, I think, on the podcast the last couple of episodes. But this weekend, it does bring it all back to the fore. It's all about the leaderboards. It's all about the game week and, where is everything going to be won and lost on the battle. And lots of Sorare managers and scouts at the moment with where the market's at and any kind of speculation around competition reformatting that seems to be bloody ever present at this point. There's lots of opportunities for managers in the market to either consolidate some strategies that they've been running, or evolve and move on some strategies that they've maybe been struggling to, like the thing I've said to you before we're coming on is, like, every time I look at a guy that's in my favorites list, I'm like, oh how much is he? So there's lots of opportunities there, kind of no matter what scarcity you're shopping in, to either make that strengthening move or maybe even make that move, diagonally up potentially.
Yeah, I like that. I've definitely been looking at my gallery. I think naturally this time of year, isn't it? I think when you start to see the fixture list kind of like padding out a little bit, got a bit more of an option across the gallery again. As for me, I've noticed that some of the Americas cards coming back in, and in terms of goalkeepers, particularly from my gallery, there are a few goalkeepers there that really open things up for me. Carlos Acevedo, having him as a super rare, obviously, like, gives me a strong option there for cap modes, and it opens up potentially all-star for me as well. So that's been really nice. And yeah, it's got me looking ahead, as I spoke to Your Fair, looking ahead at game weeks and just trying to figure out where the gaps are in my gallery, especially in those midweeks, just trying to make sure that I'm firing on all cylinders. I'll mention it for the listeners, but Quinny and I were just talking off air about some of the current strategies that we're kind of employing, and we'll get into quite a few of those on the show today. And one of the things that I was talking to him about was looking maybe 6 game weeks ahead from now and realizing that I've got some really strong options available in my gallery, but I've got a gap at defense and forward in goalkeeper. So obviously, as we know, goalkeepers are pretty expensive gaps to fill, aren't they? So it's that kind of figuring out now, is it worth me investing? Maybe I need to look ahead at more midweeks, particularly, and see where those gaps can be plugged. But in my specific situation, I think it's in like 5 or 6 game weeks from now. It's a midweek, and I find myself with Matt O'Reilly super rare, Nicholas Kuhn super rare. So 2 players that both play for Celtic, and if Kuhn becomes a starter, could potentially become 2 really strong, powerful cards, both as super rare at a team that dominate in their division. Yet not having a goalkeeper means that them 2 cards are going to be pretty useless for me in that game week. Add into the mix that I've also got one Brunetta who's made a really good start in Tigres as well. 3 decisives on the bounce in 3 fixtures. So looking ahead at that game week, I'm starting to think to myself, do I need to invest in, maybe like a Joe Hart? I say Joe Hart because logically, every time that those 2 Celtic players are playing, then he will be as well, right? Or do I look a little deeper and see like where the kind of synergy is with those 2 players and see if I can pick up another goalkeeper? As we know, Joe Hart playing for Celtic probably doesn't keep as many clean sheets as you'd like. And as we spoke about on the podcast recently, didn't we? You had, Quinny, some pretty good end products using your Celtic cards, but not using Joe Hart, using a different goalkeeper. So I've been that's been playing in my mind. What do you reckon, Quinny? How would you kind of advise through this? Is this something that's that you've kind of had to figure out during your time on the platform? And, is it something that you look at as well, like making sure that you've got lineups out in those midweeks, as you know, can be quite a good time to pick up a reward or 2, can't they?
Yeah, those island game weeks can be, it's kind of feast or famine. There's not that many rewards. That's the thing that kind of gets missed in sometimes. That when you're projecting ahead, that there is only maybe, depending on what division you're talking about, but a very small percentage compared to weekends paying out. So that really needs to pay off for it to pay off, in that regard. But I do think that looking ahead to the fixture list and targeting an island or a couple of island game weeks is definitely a path to, getting some success with moving your gallery on in some ways, because sometimes like these island game weeks, especially at this time of the season, it is like Champions League knockouts, Europa League knockouts. Maybe there's some stuff in some other territories and some other continents or whatever, that's just domestic stuff, whatever. But generally speaking, that's what it is. And subsequently, because those cards are in play, the rewards can be a little bit better in those kind of island midweeks. And the main thing, I think, when everyone's kind of building their Sorare club, is everyone wants the little teaspoons of success that their strategy should be giving them, So targeting, or when you identify these game weeks, it's one of those ones where if you marry yourself to the fact that you're going after it and you need to make it work, then sometimes the kick in the teeth of just missing out is what makes people change direction. And sometimes it's just, it's your first attempt at pulling it off. So it's the same as the international stuff we spoke about before. Like, I find it really hard to build for an international tournament just because of how quickly it can all be over or how easily plans can be undone. And I think one island game week can kind of be in the same mold. At least if you've got a team where, like, I'm thinking about the knockout round stuff, it's really hard to forecast progression in that, obviously. But if it's like in Colombia or America or something like that, you can just see, they've lucked out and they've got 4 midweeks over the next 2 months, then that's a bit better to maybe skew your angling for.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think I'd agree with you as well. Like, it's a good point you make on international tournaments, because I guess now that we're in the middle of like the current sort of AFCON tournament, there must be a few listeners and people in the chat maybe that have maybe now figured out whether or not that it was worth their time investing into a team for AFCON. I think AFCON's a bit different because it happens at the same time when a lot of the major leagues are still active. But in the summer this year, obviously we've got the Euros at a time when all the European football's finished, and a lot of international leagues will close down as well because they lose a lot of their big players to that tournament. So yes, it's an interesting point because it's not one I've really looked at yet myself. Obviously, this is a good time really to be thinking about summer, but like I said, it's really hard to envisage what those squads might look like. You know, what players might get injured, players that kind of like hit good form, players that dip again. But yeah, I guess that's the difference, isn't it, between looking maybe just 6 weeks ahead at what you've got now versus 6 months. And also, I think with like that looking ahead to maybe the summer, you've also got to factor in what does crypto do? What does the platform do, haven't you? And I mean, is that something that ever comes into your thinking? Do you ever think about, will the overall price of cards go up or down? Is this a good time to buy? That kind of thing. Because I wouldn't say it really plays on my mind quite as much, but it's probably something that I should think about a little bit more. I just feel like it's a little bit hard to gauge.
It is, and with the price of cards kind of ever moving, it's hard to know what are the opportunities in the market or what is a red flag in the market, if that makes sense. So it's definitely one of those ones where, like at the moment, I see plenty of opportunity to build upon the club I've got already, but it is that kind of what does it gain you, in that respect. So by adding in or moving up a strategy, or not moving up a strategy necessarily, but like adding into what you've got already doesn't make a material difference to the teams you'll be selecting, and you went through the lineup builder looking for, just your coverage and where you're light and where you've got available and stuff like that. But I also think looking through the same thing and seeing realistically, like what is my best team in my most competitive lineup? And then like, if I do add this guy in, how often would he actually, in theory, break into this team or make a difference to team number 2? Or, that 1 week I'm buying him for that he would cover me for the Island game week, could I get him to play a significant role in an important team outside of that? So yeah, I worry about that more than like, because the price of Ethereum and what the market does, you're just never in control of. And I'm quite good with detaching myself from the parts I'm in control of and the parts I'm not. And the main thing I'm always in control of is the players I select, to buy, to play, etc. So, it's maybe something I've picked up from a previous life or a previous job or whatever, but I always just focus on what is like, what I can influence, what I can actually have a say in the outcome towards, and as long as you understand the arena you're in or what's around you, then you're there to play, you're there to roll with the punches. So the stuff, as I say, that it's like with ETH, mate, especially us who've been on the platform for a long time, it used to be the number one thing you would look for on your phone every day. Like if you think about how many times a day you're on your phone looking at cards and Sorare and your teams and rivals and all the rest of it. For Sorare players, for the longest time, the number one thing you checked on your phone was the price of ETH, because it was changing all the time, for better and for worse. But the consequences of it were really quite different in the market. Like if you woke up one day and ETH went from 1,800 to 2.5, then that listing you've got on the market is totally different. And that card, that offer you sent, everything's now totally different all of a sudden. And I think a lot of people not wasted, that's not the correct word, but expended a lot of energy and brain power juggling around all that stuff. So I've always just tried to keep it out of my thinking, because it just gets too much to absorb.
Yeah, I think that's probably smart, to be honest. I think as well that the market, for anyone who has followed it or hasn't and is interested, it's been a bit volatile of late anyway. So, which is nice when you're collecting your rewards in ETH, because you get a little bit more ETH if you think it's going to go up anytime soon. But in terms of trying to figure out where the price of any cards go, I think that if anything I am thinking about at the moment, it is the supply of whatever the player is that I'm trying to pick up. And I think one thing that does ring true with a lot of the options that I'm looking at on the market for players that I am going to pick up, there's definitely, if there is a price impact anywhere in the market versus like similar players, there's definitely a premium to be had on players who are at like leagues or teams where we know we're not going to get their cards, but they're still going to score points. So with the reopening of like the Mexican and Argentinian leagues recently, I've noticed a few goalkeepers in particular who've like maybe moved clubs, have started well, and you see that premium on their price, don't you? You think, oh yeah, they're putting up good scores, but you're paying a premium to have those cards because their supply is low and it doesn't look like it's going to expand anytime soon. Which brings me on to another point, which someone has brought up in the chat. Big up the Don of Sorare for pointing out to us just now that while we've been on air, that they have launched and added to the auctions Porto and Benfica, which is really cool because we were wondering if we were going to get them, weren't we? And now our questions are answered. So there was someone in the chat trying to figure out if this is a time to sell their sporting cards in case they come on as well. Do you stick or twist in this situation, Quinny? If you're a holder, let's say of like sporting, would you be looking to sell those cards now? But do you think there's going to be a dip, or do you just hold on to them? Do you think that the supply of a team like that, or even Porto, Benfica, Sporting in Portugal, they're the powerhouse clubs, aren't they? But they have a lot of moving parts, don't they? Because their academies are good. They've got a lot of players in and out, a lot of youth. So, yeah, how would you play that if you were a power user of, say, Sporting, for example?
If you were doing it to if you've got the Sporting stack or the Benfica team or whatever it is, with the view of you've maybe held the season bonus an extra length of time, or you're holding on market value, like you're kind of describing there with the choked supply, with the view of capitalizing upon that to then move somewhere else, then it's maybe close to that time to execute and move on to something else. It's maybe close to that point. But if it is just to catch a high and then wait a while to then buy them back when they're a bit cheaper or something, it just feels like too much work for probably not enough gain. And that, who knows how much gain there would be in that. Don't take that as gospel, of course, but that's what my thinking would be with it. Like with New York cards or Celtic cards or anything, it's like, so for me, if it is like actual support the club, because Rico Man, who's asked the question, I know follows Sporting very intently now. Like I've done this with Celtic and with New York, who I've both just kind of mentioned there. But for me, when the new season cards come out, I'm more filling squads. So I've already got a strong collection of, let's say, Sporting, because that's the example. But Sporting in the summer, they signed 2 guys, or they got a new guy from the academy, and you don't have these cards. I then kind of look at it as more a case of where's the missing pieces. So I've still got the rotation coverage in the squad. Right, okay, there's 5 of them. And then, can I get that to 3%? No, I can't. Okay, so it's going to be 2% anyway. How many of them do I need to buy off the market? How many of them can I buy secondary or whatever? And then work it from there. But I say if the play is to enjoy them in the market because they had a choked supply and they were more expensive than some of their contemporaries, then if that's the angle, then it's maybe time to execute. Yeah, so I've been trying to do that with Trubin, as is mentioned also there, and I mentioned to you beforehand. Like, I don't know, I just got people were mentioning in the members chat and in a few other places, just like, oh, Benfica cards are back on auction, like last season's ones. They were back on auction like last week, and I just thought, oh no, Trubin is in that kind of situation of choke supply, performing very well under 23 premium, and I was just thinking, is this maybe the week where, I love Trubin, love him, but buying a goalkeeper for £25, the objective is always to try and peak on it at some point and catch it. He's been more expensive. I've probably missed that opportunity, don't get me wrong. And we'll see how the auctions go today. But it is something that you always contemplate. And for me, Stish, I always call it, in my mind anyway, Kamada syndrome. Because one of the very first cards I really enjoyed on the platform was a Daichi Kamada card I had. He got 6 issues when he was in Belgium. And then obviously he was at Frankfurt for about 2 or 3 seasons. The majority of the time he's been on Sorare, and they won the Europa League, and they were very good in the league. And his price was amazing for ages because he only had 6 cards, and he was, it was a smaller field of players to choose from. So a guy that could bring in 40 or 70, and was under 23 was moderately appealing. But as soon as they did the Bundesliga deal and they got all the Bundesliga cards come out, his price went from being hanging, and obviously price of ETH and everything was totally different. But imagine it was like a quarter of an ETH for 0.3. Yeah. It then turned into 0.12 overnight, or Sorloth. It could be called Sorloth syndrome. It's had the same thing with Alexander Sorloth, but he was rubbish. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a few players I've got in my gallery like that, because I paid out for like Joel Piroa, who is still in quite a low supply because he's at Leeds, but he has PSV cards available from a few seasons back. And until recently, he was pretty nailed on at Leeds, a club that, like, you know, we're looking to dominate in the Championship, under 23, all that midweek potential. So he was one of those cards I kind of bought ahead of time, thinking Leeds are going down. He's going to be in the Championship. He's under 23. You know, he was a big scorer at Swansea as well before he went to Leeds. So I was definitely looking at what's going to happen with Leeds this season when they went down. Like, are we going to get Leeds mints in the Championship, or was that part of like a Prem only deal? So his supply is quite low, but he's kind of recently lost his position in the starting lineup. He, you know, he still gets on. He managed a decisive from the bench on the weekend, but didn't play in the midweek, and that's kind of what he's in my gallery for, really. You know, adding to the mix whether or not, you know, U23s as appealing as it was. I've been kind of putting him actually more into like the all-star kind of entrance, in especially in the midweeks, where I thought he was going to score highly. But yeah, it is an interesting touch point for anyone holding those Benfica and Sporting cards. So definitely, I feel that a lot with my own gallery, especially cards that I've got that maybe playing like the Chinese Super League, for example. I'll always be looking for players that maybe move in there. I think that that's like almost like the dream SO5 scenario, is one of your cards moving to Chinese Super League to go to a team where they're likely to perform and every game and score highly. And that stops the supply, but it doesn't stop the scoring. Plus, from my experience, Chinese Super League is one of those leagues where you do get those random midweek fixtures as well. So I definitely had a lot of luck with the cards that I held from that platform, from that league, sorry, last season. And I think one of them was Kim Min Woo, who was playing for Chengdu. And I haven't seen anything official just yet, but there was a lot of noise that he was going to be moving to Ulsan, which isn't a bad move. But it just means, you know, we might get supply. Obviously, there's another talking point there, isn't there, on the whole situation with the Korean coverage. Like, if you can put up with waiting for those scores to come in, and, you know, on some of those, obviously we've got the Korean fixtures through now, and there are some of those game weeks where there's going to be people kicking off like at 2 p.m. on a Friday, where they're not, probably, unless there is some kind of resolution with the scoring situation, their scores are not going to be added to your teams on those midweeks, and they won't be of any use for the weekends either. So it's yeah, I think it's crunch time, isn't it? I think we should expect some kind of communication from Sorare about that in the next few weeks, because the season starts in 4 weeks, I think. The beginning of March is the first game weeks for Korea, so be interesting to see how that pans out. But yeah, that kind of ties into the whole supply thing as well, because I think I do worry for holders of Korean cards if there isn't like a sensible outcome from the findings of the tests that they said they did with the South Korean cards, and like the sort of alternative coverage. I don't know what it's called, but it's not
I
Opta.
forget as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, as someone who does have quite a few sort of South Korean options. But yeah, Rico Man in the chat saying if the Asian Cup is anything to go by, we will get told last minute. I would say then, on that note, maybe no news is not good news, because if they're going to, maybe if we knew that it was good news, we'd know about it now. So that might be worth considering. But, you know, I feel more, I guess for me, it's not the end of the world, because I haven't got like the majority of my gallery in South Korea like some people do, and I think that they're the people that are going to really feel the brunt of any situation that doesn't end positively from that kind of part of the stratosphere, if you like. But yeah, we'll be keeping an eye out for that, no doubt. So, Quinny, with just to get back onto you mentioning Trubin there, you've obviously had recent success in U23. What is the sort of play there for you in terms of like potentially moving Trubin on? Was that purely like potentially trying to ride that kind of the financial ups and downs of it, or was the potential move out for Trubin more of a time to reinvest into maybe more challenger options, or rare pro, rare plus, that kind of thing? What was the thinking there?
Yeah, well, a lot of the opportunity I've kind of enjoyed over the last couple of weeks, like in terms of strengthening the club and some of the stuff we were mentioning at the kind of beginning there, is like bringing in, and it's actually it's going to be a good week for him now after it being a bit of a bad week for him, but bringing in guys like Goretzka, obviously I got Oyarzabal in right at the beginning of the winter window, Timo Werner. Like, I'm looking at super rares now that not that long ago were so far beyond me. And I'm sure, like, I see the same at Rare. I've seen this to you before we came on. I might have said at the beginning of the show, but every time I go into the secondary market and filter by favourites, I can't believe the price of some of the guys. I've been crossing my fingers and thinking, oh, if I save up or if I get a few wins under my belt, maybe I'll go and get this guy or that guy. So many of them are like right in touching distance. And for me, when it comes to like the pro aspect of Sorare, like playing Sorare Pro and like playing for competitive, all the things that come around with being competitive, you know, cards, money, and everything else in between. That's always what I'm pushing the gallery to be better at, you know. So it is a case of having a market situation where Trubin, like, I don't know what he'll go for today, but you know, when I'm looking at my gallery value and what I've got versus contemporaries in the market, like Trubin, last sale before today was like 0.61, one before that was 0.59, and back in December it was like mega when he was first playing for Benfica. It went balubas, and like Van der Vaart's a quarter of an ETH. You know, there's actual non-23 keepers that are like 0.1 and stuff like this. So I kind of thought, if I can sell Trubin, replace him in spirit with another goalkeeper, whether it be challenger or whether it be under 23 or not, I'm not, you know, cross that bridge in a minute. But when with the surplus, could I really reinforce with, you know, a headline kind of acquisition like some of the guys I've named already? And I know they're not everyone's cup of tea, but they're my cup of tea. And they're the sort of guys that I want in my gallery. And I believe they'll do well for me, you know. So it was more that kind of, I'm always about having your cake and eating it if you can. You know, could I sell a goalkeeper and replace him with a goalkeeper that's on paper the same thing and have something big and shiny to show for it? That's most of my good moves that I've made in Sorare that have moved my club on. That kind of thing is going on somehow. So it was more that I kind of maybe had a bit of deja vu and thought, okay, this might be another Harwood Bellis, this might be another Hakimi, this might be another Van der Vaart, like the, you know, previous times I'd had him. And yeah, sadly, I just don't think I've got there quick enough. I don't know. As soon as people were saying Benfica cards, I was already thinking about it. And people were like, oh, last season Benfica cards are on sale again. I just thought, oh man, I'm looking at this, and this is happening at the same. This is a sign I should be moving. I should be doing something with this at the moment. That's just kind of how it felt. And I was maybe a day or two behind what I should have been, because the sort of, when you're doing that, when you're selling like a high value piece in your limited gallery, your rare gallery or whatever, and you're going to go and execute it, realize the profit, make the trade, make the bank, whatever it is you're looking to do with it, you only get to do it once, you know, like, and I've said this quite a lot on the podcast over the 80 plus episodes or whatever, but like, once you sell Trubin, once you sell Hakimi, once you sell Taylor Harwood Bellis, Kieran Trippier, whoever it is, once you sell them, they're gone. You know, like, and it's like, and it kind of comes back to the Sporting Lisbon thing. Like, if you're going to buy the Sporting Lisbon cards back anyway, like, you then need to think about what is the cost of the upheaval. You know, are you gaining much, if anything? Is the gain worth it? If that makes sense. So it's about picking your moments with some of these ones, and I just felt that was maybe a moment.
Yeah. No, I like that one. I don't know if you remember when I won the Van der Vaart in the game week a few months back now, but that was my thinking as well, was like, I've already got a Van der Vaart, so it kind of doesn't, I'm not a massive fan of having two of the same player. I do have a couple of like that, but Van der Vaart he just felt like a bit of a expensive luxury in my gallery for someone who already had one. And I was exactly the same as you. Can I sell this card and get something equally as good for less money? And when I was looking at Van der Vaart, for example, I was looking at potential like similar goalkeepers. And another issue I had with Van der Vaart was actually his price is really high, but his supply is massive because he's been on the platform since it began. We get like, there's hundreds of Van der Vaarts out there. So that's another reason where I felt like holding him didn't make as much sense. If I needed options, I probably need a goalkeeper that is less likely to be seen in like the sort of top 5 teams or whatever. So I was
Probably
looking
the most dangerous under 23 keeper in that sense, because see, as soon as
he
he goes
is.
0-23, he'll have
Oh,
mad supply, and then he's a guy.
yeah.
Interesting.
That's it. And I think he'll be a great keeper to have for that. So for me, like, I don't mind holding on to him until, I'll probably use him forever. He could go on to become like one of the great goalkeepers on the platform. So I don't mind having him in that sense. But in terms of having him for U23, it was like, this is an expensive luxury, and his price is massive considering his supply. His price is massive. So I felt a little bit like, I think he might be a bit overpriced in the market as it is. But then I looked at maybe replacing him with Trubin, or the other one I was looking at was Chevalier at Lille. But because of their supply being the complete opposite, because we didn't have Lille cards at the time, we've since had new mints for Lille. But when I was looking, Trubin and Chevalier were two of the best performing goalkeepers on the platform in U23, but they also had like stunted their supply. There was no new mints of them as far as we could see. Obviously, that's changed for both of them now. But yeah, in the end, what I did was like, right, I sold him, and I thought, cool, I've got that ETH in the bank now, and I will probably wait for like a good time to try and buy a replacement. So I was looking at obviously these two guys, potentially like another sort of Asia or America option who is U23. But then I think I mentioned this to you maybe off air. Obviously, recently we've had the news of Tani moving back to J League, and that for me already plugs the gap, because when I went in with the mindset of, right, I need another U23 rare keeper, but it can't be Van der Voort, get the money and then we'll buy. In that moment in time, I was waiting, expecting to only have maybe 2 goalkeeper options after the summer, and that would have been Van der Voort and Chris Brady, super rare. The rest of mine would have aged out. So I was like, I'm kind of short a rare goalkeeper option. But then obviously, like I said, Tani came in. And then more recently, we've had Okoye at Udinese, who seems to have semi-cemented himself into that like number 1 position, maybe at least until the end of the season. We'll see how that pans out. But I'm in a much better position now than I was in when I won the Van der Voort. And even another random one like Calvin Ratzi has gone on loan to Roda JC, who are in the second tier of Dutch football, but he's become a starter there, and they're currently like 3rd in the league, so they could get promoted if they ended up signing him permanently. Then I'd have another super rare goalkeeper U23. So anyway, long story short, I think the point I'm trying to make is I've learned through not rushing into that decision that actually I'm now like probably about 700 quid better off for it, because I sold the goalkeeper, and now I probably don't even really need another U23 option unless a load of injuries come about. So yeah, just a little nod to the importance of being patient and knowing when to strike. And like to your point earlier about seeing the price of the cards that you really want start to drop. If I wanted to go back in the market for a Chevalier now, he would be a lot cheaper than he was when I sold that Van der Voort, and I could probably get him for probably roughly the same price now as the Van der Voort that I sold, maybe even less, because he's got that supply coming from the Lille cards.
Yeah, I think Chevalier as well, because when he was like breaking through as a number 1, he had no cards at all for ages as well. So he's just like, his prices obviously until recently, but it was always mad inflated. And yeah, Tani again, like as well for me, it's not like Trubin, I'm going to cut off under 23. I've got a lot of accidental under 23s, like guys I would have anyway, and I've obviously won 1 or 2 of them along the way. And I don't think I've done that great in under 23 this season, to be quite frank, but I do have players that should be putting me in the picture, and I don't mind continuing to compete in there with the Trubin and like just keeping them rolling on. But I do look at so when I look at the kind of top end of the gallery, and you're moving into the cards where you're getting a bit more excited with, and it's like, oh, imagine I could win a tier 2 at that level, or imagine I could pick up a regular tier 1 or something like that. It's the opportunities for those ones, the ones where you've been eyeing up the most are the ones where like they just make the biggest difference. Like I've had a bit of fun in this January transfer window the last couple of days, Stish. I've went out and I've got some January transfer, like not rumors, but like deal could be on. That's when I kind of like to jump on
Yeah,
them.
love that.
And I got a Shinaldo Becker, who made a great debut in the Cup for Sociedad last night. I got him for 0.02 of an ETH, an old threshold, 40 quid. I got a Stefano Sensei in for 50 quid, 0.025. Because I just think him at Leicester and that Maresca team, he could just be an AA killer. And I also went out and I got a little guy because I've got Trubin on first owner, right? And
Mhm.
I've got a Konya Planka jersey mint, and I've got a Manor Solomon. So between the three of them, I had a Shakhtar collection at 110.2%. But when I listed Trubin, I lose 10 points. It puts me on 100. And in
Mm.
that kind of finagling of seeing if I could get money for Trubin and make some sort of magical deal happen, I also included Solomon in a kind of a bought valuation situation, which lost him 10 points on collection bonus. So for £10, I went and picked out a player I actually bought this summer and sold him because he got a terrible loan. Lazio midfielder who's on loan at Pau, Marcus Antonio, formerly of Shakhtar Donetsk, obviously. Because I've seen a little one of these rumours, but it's not a rumour, but it's like the deal might be on. He might be going to Brazil on loan for the remainder of. And in my experience, European class players, Brazilians especially, especially ones that are young, when they go back home,
Yeah.
they normally springboard. You know, they normally do quite well and then maybe move to La Liga or move to Benfica or something like that, you know. So he was a tenner, got my Trubin and Co back onto 2%. So all this listing shenanigans hasn't done me anything. And he was a tenner. So what's that there? 80, 100, basically about 100 quid on free transfer plays, a forward and two mids. So I've had a wee bit of fun with some frivolous ones, but it's just because of how cheap they are. Like, yeah, I think Sensei and Becker, for example, as individuals, like they can score over 60 plus
Yeah,
half a dozen times each this season. And to bring in scores like that will make a difference to some of my teams.
absolutely. I'm a bit jealous of your market activity. I've not been that fortunate recently, and like anything that I've seen on the market where I didn't feel was like the right price, and I've gone in with offers. I've just nothing's really landed for me. The only one I did pick up recently was on Transfer News. Was a player I had in limited, Ricardo Centurion, who moved to a club that was uncovered, and I saw that it was announced that he was moving back to Vélez. You know, where he'd done quite well a few seasons back. He's a little bit older now. I think he's 31 now. But Vélez have obviously like let go of quite a few players. He's going to come in. He's got a forward card. I put in a cheeky offer of about 50 quid, I think it was, for his super rare. Number one as well. Not that it matters because it wasn't really, you know, I think he was with I can't remember what club it was, but it's the red and blue side. He's got cards with Vélez. He's got cards with whatever that red and blue.
Fortaleza?
No, it's hold on. I'm gonna get him up on the Centurion. Ricardo Centurion. What is that red and blue side? Sorry, mate. But yeah, that's gonna annoy me now. No, normally wouldn't. But San Lorenzo. That's who it is. Yeah, was it San? And then he moved. He moved to Baracas Central. He was playing there for a bit, and yeah, like he's capable of putting up big scores when he's in good form. But anyway, long story short, saw some news. He hasn't been updated until really recently, but I picked him up really cheap. I think I got his rare for like a tenner or something like that, really cheap. And
Nice.
hopefully, you know, if he turns out to be a starter, but I do love it when you get ahead on a bit of news. And I think that one was, I just didn't seem to have been picked up. You know, when you look on Sorare data and that hasn't got that little spike, particularly on the
Yeah.
limited. If you see that, you know that everyone knows that the move's going ahead and everyone's jumping on it early, and you might have missed the opportunity to get in at the bottom end of that spike. But he had a little spike, not a massive one. He's still very cheap, I think. But yeah, I managed to pick him up at probably like a quarter of his current floor price, but not many other people have picked him up yet. But if he does go on to play, then he'll be a bargain. And if he's not, it hasn't cost me the world to take a little punt on him. And I think that is the one part of Sorare when like my gambling hat comes on a little bit is like, let's have a little punt on someone who might have that move. And I don't know about you, but I follow a lot of like the sort of transfer accounts all over the world on Twitter. And one of the things I love doing is when someone gets the, you know, like the here we go, and it's a player maybe that's moved in South America, not one of the big clubs, because normally we've been listening to stories about those sort of transfers for months on end until they happen. But, you know, if we get like a little here we go somewhere, I love to go back through Twitter and search like that player and that club and find out who was the first person to mention a potential move. Because 99 times out of 100, it's not the person that breaks the news at the end of it. It's not, you know, your Fabrizio Romanos or Ornsteins. It's someone else on the ground at local level. And I love following accounts like that for those random kind of South American teams, those, you know, Colombian teams, Peruvian teams. They'll have their equivalent Ornsteins, won't they, on the ground? And I've started to put them together in a bit of a list so that I can kind of keep an eye on a lot of Google Translate activity and see if we can pick up a bargain or two, especially when it's goalkeepers. I love a goalkeeper trade, even if it's not one that I particularly need, but really interesting. I love that part of the game, getting in early. And that was like my Centurion move was the only one of those I've really made in this window. The Don of Sorare, where would one be able to see that? If you follow me on Twitter at Plastician, if you go into lists, I think there's like Sorare info. I think it's public. You can just see all the accounts that I follow for like football and Sorare information. If let me have a look and see if that works. If you go onto Plastician and then you go into lists, view lists, and then Sorare info feed. I think you can follow it. And there's like 200 accounts I follow, and you know, it's everything from your Ornsteins to like football talent scouting accounts, stats, coaches, that kind of stuff. It's a bit of everything. It might be a little bit overwhelming if you want to check it out, but definitely some useful ones. If I ever find a decent account, he goes in there. I can follow him and see what the crack is. Because I think it's really difficult, isn't it? If you're looking at those South American leagues, that kind of thing, to kind of stay up to date with transfers. I find particularly difficult, actually, like Turkish league. I find the Turkish league really hard to find. I don't know if it's just because maybe a lot of the Turkish players have very common names. Obviously not common to us, but maybe in parts of Turkey. Whenever I search for players,
like Yildirim.
Yeah, like pop stars will come up, or like politicians or something like that. I think I've got a goalkeeper who's out on loan in the second tier of Turkish football, like Fenerbahce backup, and I search him every now and then to see how he's getting on. And I think he has the same name as a major politician over there, so it's really hard to kind of keep up with what he's up to. But yeah, it's we got FIFA royalty in the chat saying some of the South American journalists have like 1,000, 2,000 followers, but they're just as reliable as anyone. You just don't know who's looking.
Obscure, isn't it? Because it's like Bolivia or it's like a rural bit of Brazil or something like that. On the whole South America thing, I've got a guy, Thiago Andrade, in my New York City collection. He moved to Fluminense from New York, and the reports I think they're all but confirmed, but he's now left Fluminense. He's on his way to China.
Really?
So, yeah. Thiago Andrade, like, I'd like him to go to Celtic, maybe. I think he's a great player. He's one of my favourites at New York. You know, I thought he was quality. But yeah, he's on his way to, he's like going to China. Shezwan. I don't even know if they're in the proper division. I better go check that now since we're talking about it.
He says, so one of the accounts I do follow, the Asian Football News account, they're kind of reporting it, and they're normally pretty on point when it comes to the moves. And yeah, they said Sichuan Jinyu. It is a Super League team, I think. So that could be really good if you've still got his card, Quinny. You still got that one?
Yeah. It's my New York collection, ticking on 15%. I don't see the team, but maybe it's a different spelling on his website. But there's a team called Shenzhen who are bottom. I hope it's not them. Yeah. But I remember it's SECH. It's Sheshon or something, isn't it? But I don't see them. Maybe they got promoted from the second tier, maybe?
Possibly. Possibly. I think one of the teams that came up was like a big
Yeah,
spender.
they have. They won the bottom division.
There you go.
Yeah, I found him.
Yeah.
So that's cool. He'll be in their team. Hopefully they're half decent. Get me some points. The team is entirely Chinese, I think. There is a Spanish manager, 2 Spanish players that you've never heard of, and a Nigerian that you've never heard of. So I think Thiago Andrade is the star of the show, the star attraction of this team. So
It's going to be
a wee
really
one
interesting.
that's going to mind.
I think we
I
might
know
be
some people
waiting.
in the chat love the China cards.
Yeah, I love them, man. I think that's a big one for me, is like anyone linked to China. Sometimes I'll pay a little bit over the odds to get them in, because if they do go, in my experience, I've had so Romulo went really well for me, and Felipe, and actually Kim Min Woo was really good as well. So all of the Chengdu cards I bought, and then if you look historically at was it Son Jun Ho, who moved over there from John Book, and he was like the highest scoring card on the platform for ages until he got embroiled in some kind of gambling thing, and he's in big trouble over it apparently. But a lot of people are very skeptical of how like real those reports are. But anyway, nonetheless, he's not been able to play. But another card is a guy called Davidson, who I think is like an AA monster over there. So, it doesn't even need to be a big name player. It could just be like a run of the mill player playing in the K League who makes that move to China, finds themselves in like a good position in the team, maybe gets on a set piece or two. So yeah, I definitely get quite excited when I see any of my players linked to China. In also in other news in the sort of like Asia region as well. Another thing I haven't mentioned, but I think I've mentioned using the Sorare based website before. It's quite useful to see any moves that have happened inside your gallery. If you search for your manager name on sorarebase.football, and then underneath your manager name, there's like a little sort of like drop down menu, and there's one called like Mercato. If you click that, it shows any move that any of your card has made from club to club. And one that I completely missed, which came up in my gallery this week, which was a really good one for me. Quinny, you might be familiar with him, a defensive midfielder, Daiki Matsuoka, who a few years ago was at Sagan Tosu. Then he went to Shimizu S-Pulse, who got relegated, but he was sent out on loan to like the second tier of Brazilian football, and he barely played a minute. He had a bit of a Tanny situation, similarly, when he went out on loan to the Belgian second tier. Anyway, he has returned to the J League. He's been moved to Avispa Fukuoka for the season. So I am going to get used to a card that I haven't had use of for a long time, but just held on to him because I didn't want to let him go cheaply. And yeah, I do like a defensive midfielder. I think they're in the right team, can be like a powerhouse of all-around scores. So fingers crossed for him next season. But that was a nice little. It's almost like a new signing, isn't it? When your prodigal son returns to the fore and available for selection. But I think because of the way maybe the Japanese football transfers are reported, maybe or Opta updated, whatever. If you look on the SoRareBase.football website, just on the main page, you can go to the Mercato drop down menu there, and it will just show you every card on the platform that's moved club to club. And there is just an absolute slew of players within the J League. So I think maybe the J League have updated their rosters now, like on sort of wherever we or Sorare gets their like data from for the API. All of those transfers have been updated on the Sorare system now. So if you've got any J League players, have a little look at your gallery on there if you might have missed something. But there was definitely a few that I completely missed. But his one was particularly appealing to me. Quinny, have you had any fortunate moves in your gallery through the last month or so?
Yeah, I had one. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show, but like in the whole Girona collection I've been building, about 2 months ago, I bought a jersey number. So it was number 2 in the squad. Bernardo Espinosa, who's like a 33-year-old centre back at Girona. He's moved back to Colombia to like the best team or one of the best teams in Colombia. He's made his debut, a solid 48 with no clean sheet, which is nice. So yeah, I didn't see that coming. And like I was kind of like, oh yeah, maybe we'll use this guy, but Kieran Tierney picked up a bit of an injury last night. I think he'll be out for another month. And Sociedad have signed a replacement, or they signed another left back on loan, because the other left back they had, Munoz, he's done his ACL. So I thought, crap, I've now lost Tierney. I'm down a super defender. And then all of a sudden I see this guy playing for Atletico Nacional in Colombia. I got the telltale offers from people when it happened, like, so I knew it was coming. And also in that collection, I've got Ibrahim Akebe, who's like a defensive midfielder, scored really well in La Liga 2 for Girona like 3 years ago or whatever. And he's just been loaned down to that division. So he'll be getting some utility. Don't know how good he'll be if I'll use him. But some nice happy accident transfers. Also, Gonzalo Guedes has went to Villarreal under the same manager he had at Valencia. And one thing, this may be a bit of a tip, a bit of a shout, right? But if you look at Gonzalo Guedes and when he was at Valencia, he had some really, really good scores. He had some really good form. The number one problem with him is he only had midfielder cards. And the midfielder scores, if he changed the setting, they're way worse than the forward cards. But the Benfica issue that he got is forward. So if he's back in La Liga with the same manager, with Danny Parejo in the team again, I know Danny Parejo's a bit injured now and whatever, but it was the same kind of time period these guys were playing. It could be a good one, and he's got a forward card available. Now, it's only the Benfica issues, so none of the Valencia issues. I see a Wolves forward card here as well for sale, a number 1 of. It's got a wee nice one on it. So Gonzalo Guedes is another one that's happened. Maybe he'll be useful, but he's one to watch out for, especially the forward card being available. It could be a really sneaky one.
Yeah, I like that. I've just had a look on their website as well, and actually the Kim Min-woo transfer did go through 2 days ago, so he has moved from the Chinese Super League to Ulsan Hyundai. So bit gutted that I'm not going to have a bit of a Chinese Super League activity, but that does mean that if he does come into a team like Ulsan and can like cement his place in the starting lineup, I've got quite a few cards from that team now. So not an awful move for me gallery wise. That's always nice, isn't it, when you kind of stumble on a new kind of stack, if you like. And I think that that is potentially a really good one at a club like Ulsan, who have been pretty dominant in the K-League. But there's so much going on in the transfer market. It is really hard to keep on top of it, but it is nice, isn't it, when like you're on the right side of a good transfer. In other transfer news, someone who's not, in my opinion, I want to get your opinion on it, Quinny, though. Arthur Vermeeren, heavily tipped to be moving to Atletico Madrid from Antwerp. Obviously, he's been one of the big breakout stars in probably in European football, actually, because he's been so good in the Champions League as well, against the likes of Barcelona. So he really put himself on the map this season, hasn't he? He's super young. He's got the world at his feet. Quinny, how do you rate his potential move to Atletico Madrid? I think it's all but done, according to a lot of the transfer accounts on Twitter. So, yeah, what do you reckon the future holds for him?
I think it'll be great at Atleti, to be honest with you. If you watch Atleti, they've been quite painful, as everyone in the Sorare community loves to talk about. They're very painful to watch for SO5 purposes if you've not got Griezmann, especially. Yeah. But one of the things that really has held them back, as much as the guy's a club legend, is Koke in centre defensive mids. Like, because their midfield, like, he wants to play De Paul in every game. He wants to play Llorente. He wants to play Barrios, guys that are more mobile to help carry the ball a bit more. And he can't not play Koke because there's not another defensive mid. Not that he even is a defensive mid. He just kind of fell into there through age and just becoming less mobile. But they need a real centre mid, defensive mid, to allow De Paul the space to be De Paul and whoever else they're going to bring on into the team for that attacking pace. Because that's the way it's kind of, De Paul's on playmaking stuff, you know. Koke, who has been the, you know, defensive mid, but ideally they want someone in there that can cover ground and tackle a bit better. And then they've got another midfielder who's normally just going in for overloads and going in to, you know, maybe even overlap in the wide areas or get into the box itself. So when that's the little triangle, if you've got Koke at the base of that, who doesn't cover much ground, although fantastic at passing and a great leader and a captain, it's part of the thing where Atletico Madrid have drop points. It's just they get cut open sometimes, and it's just kind of like, all their fragility gets shown. So I think Vermeeren will be a double merchant in this team. I don't see him not getting duels galore. I don't see him not getting interceptions galore. Tackles are a hard statistic to measure in terms of forecasting and whatever, but Spanish football, the way Atletico Madrid play, like double should be on the cards for him quite often, I would think. Don't know about final third. Yet to be seen. It's a big step up going from La Liga. You know, hard to see how many minutes he'll get, but there's a place in the team for him, undeniably. He's not one of these guys that's making a move and you're like, how does he even get in this team? Or he's going to have to be really good to get in ahead of him. Or, you know, the place is there for him in the team to take. So I think it's a good move. And we're now starting to see Coop Miners has been linked to Juventus. It might be one of those moves where he goes to Atleti, is good, and then goes somewhere, and you're like, whoa,
Right.
he's a Rodri now. You know, he's been at Atleti and done his time, you know, or whatever.
I mean, yeah, that's a good example, isn't it, of that kind of Atleti step, really. Rodri is kind of as good as it gets. But yeah, for me, I think short term, his SO5 output will probably be not quite where it was. But like, I'd agree, like, with you in that he fits the system, what they need. It's a bit gutting, obviously, from as a Man United fan, seeing a player like that move to Atleti, because he's exactly the kind of piece that we could do with, but he's probably a bit young, and you know, to come and try and cut his teeth in the Premier League off the back of the Belgian Pro League, bit of a big step up, especially for someone of his age, but a massive signing for the future. And I think on, you know, the evidence we've had up to this point, I don't think he's miles off being like at the level that he needs to be to like really make it in Atletico. But I do think like in the short term, maybe between now and the end of this season, it could be a potentially, you know, we could see a drop in his price. If he is a card or a player that you like and you're thinking, I would like one of them in my gallery, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a dip in the price because of obvious rotations, that kind of thing. But yeah, I agree. I think it's a great move for him. Maybe not a great move for SO5 for holders of him just yet, but could be an opportunity to get in if you haven't got him now. I would be watching his price for a potential entry, little drop in price there maybe. But yeah, really,
he still should score pretty well because Atleti do dominate possession against a lot of teams, so he should get a lot of frivolous passes as well. And one of the things he did impress with in the Champions League was being in the final third, creating some, he got some assists. I think he scored against Barca, maybe. You know, so like I wouldn't totally, you know, he's still very young, a lot of development. But
yeah,
I do think it's one of the moves that could be not too bad. You know, SO5 wise, I don't think it. You know, being at Antwerp to win the league, it's hard to be better than that SO5 wise for a wee guy like him.
true.
But I don't think it's that bad a move. I think he can still shoot around the 60s most games on 8A, I think.
I think the main issue I've got is like the one that you highlighted around like Koke and like how they kind of like ease him out of the selection. And I think that in the short term, you know, I think maybe this time next year, Vermeer might have cemented himself as a starter. But I think between now and the end of the season, he might be a difficult pick. You know, like one of them where you're trying to figure out, is he going to start this week or next week? Or are they going to rest him for the Champions League? Is it that? That's the little headache that you don't really have at the moment as a holder, which you can probably have, or you might you at least have it for the first few games, won't you? Like, let's see what happens once he signs. First 3 games, if he starts all of them, then you're laughing. But yeah, I'm expecting a bit of rotation there. But for me, it also breathes life into like the Al Hassan Yusuf card that I hold, and I'm sure there's a few other listeners that have him as well that would have seen that move and thought, well, that's our guy back in. Then he should, you know, unless they bring in a fresh face. Yusuf was really good in SO5 terms for Antwerp towards the back end of last season. Lost his place to Vermeer and through injury, and just hasn't been able to get it back. And rightly so as well. I think Vermeeren's been much better, much more dynamic, at least. Let's say I think like in the final third, that's where he is leaps and bounds ahead of Yusuf. But I think Yusuf in like his sort of like break up and defensive play, he's on par with Vermeer, and he gets a lot of interceptions. He's a really good reader of the ball. So I'm going to be excited to hopefully get, fingers crossed, we get a similar output from him between now and the end of the season that we had this time last year, because he was pretty clutch for me in terms of like U23 mids. And I've missed that this season a little bit, like having, you know, like Veerman aged out. I've got Matt O'Reilly in, who gives me a similar output, but because I've only got like one at the moment in U23, I just really want another one who starts banging big scores in so that I can really like start looking at U23 Rare Plus again as like a viable entry point. Because at the minute, I'm moving O'Reilly into probably like All-Star. So I've been concentrating more on U23 Rare. And just to pick up on that point, that came to me because someone in the chat who I kind of have to go through was talking about do you have like a specific ratio that you work with from like goalkeepers to the rest of your gallery? And I said it in the chat, but for anyone that's just listening, I typed it back out. But I don't personally have like a specific ratio that feels like right from goalkeeper to the rest of my gallery, because I actually hold a lot of goalkeepers that are not for now, they're for like when they get in the team. I just picked them up cheap because I think, you know, they're young and within 3 years they might be someone of use. So I've got quite a lot of goalkeepers that I know I can't even consider for selection. But I think for me, and I don't know about you, Quinny, but as I mentioned earlier, like looking in the game weeks ahead, realizing that I've got a really strong team that does that, but I don't have an entry because I don't have a goalkeeper. It's things like that for me. And like talking about this point on like the U23 options, if I had two really strong super rare U23 players, but I didn't have two goalkeepers who were rare, then I would look to be bringing in like a rare U23, because it made no sense for me to have like an O'Reilly and a Veerman if I weren't going to use them in U23 and have a strong goalkeeper option to pair them with. And that goes across a lot of the regions for me. Any region that I really want to play, if I have really strong cards in other positions, that's when I'm like, right, goalkeeper needs to be on point, or I need to at least have that option. So that's kind of like how I work out whether or not I have got enough goalkeepers, or it's more about having the right goalkeepers. Like if I've got an absolutely banging Asia lineup, but I haven't got a banging Asia keeper or any keeper, then I really need to look at some of the kind of like dead spots in my gallery and see if I can swap some of those players out for an Asian goalkeeper that I can put to use. What about you, Quinny? Anything like that kind of work in your gallery?
I had thought of a point and it just totally fell out the back of my head there, because I was looking at something else for a second in the chat. Can you just remind me exactly what we were mentioning there? What the actual
So
point
someone
was?
in the chat was asking, like, is there like a ratio in your gallery of like goalkeepers
Yeah.
to outfielders?
Yeah. So normally when I've made like beginner content, and I kind of think about this for probably my blues and my blacks, I think the best place to start off is 3-1. So for every goalkeeper you get 3 defenders, 3 mids, 3 forwards. If you think about that as a base squad, maybe you don't get 3 forwards, you get 4 mids and 2 forwards, whatever. But I think if you do look at your Champ Euro contingent, who's the keeper? Who's your number 1 defender, 2 and 3? Who's your number 1 midfielder, 2 and 3? Number 1 forward, 2 and 3. You'll get a 5-a-side out of that, like almost every week. Even if it's caps, you'll probably be flexible enough for most caps with that kind of options, depending on obviously the quality. If you're buying all the Kimmiches and Kanes, maybe not. But within reason. And again, like maybe after a while you realise, the third defender never gets a game, and then maybe you sell him and you get another mid who actually plays because the other mid you had didn't play or whatever. But I do think that gives you enough kind of coverage over the positions, and like it leaves you flexible enough for later on if you did want to change direction or pivot ever so slightly, or not like, I've not got 5 mids and 1 forward, and these kind of things that get a bit lopsided all of a sudden. One forward's out, you're screwed, kind of thing. So I think when you're starting off, certainly when you're starting a new strategy, I think 3-1 is a good way to go. So a squad's 10 guys is a nice way to think of it.
Yeah, I like that. That kind of like bit of flexibility. But I suppose I don't know about you, but I look at the regions a lot later in my sort of selection process at the moment. Sometimes I'll look at U23, and at the moment now that I've had the wins that I've had, it really opened Champ up for me. But I didn't really used to play Champ last season until obviously winning. I've won a lot of Champ cards like Ter Stegen, Donnarumma, Mbappe, Kane, and Kimmich. So like having those cards at my disposal, it's put Champ front and center. And I'm really intrigued to find out, Nicholas has kind of touched on it, hasn't he, on Twitter, that big names will be big names. And what was the exact terminology he used? Something that was like
stars be stars.
Stars will be stars. So it's really put me off like listing any like really big cards. I'm like, what does that mean? What how do you interpret that? Are we going to get like a tier 0 league or something like that? What do you think?
I think they should be under some sort of refinement, like further refinement of the tiers and such, because I heard Channy talking about this on Sorare Data this week. He kind of summed it up pretty well. But Like at first, when they revamped everything, the star tier, the tier zeros was shallow. There wasn't that many names or faces in it,
Yeah,
and that changed. And the vacuum effect that has, you're then pulling better quality out of tier 1 into the star. You're then pulling the quality out of tier 2 into tier 1, and then subsequently tier 3s are becoming tier 2s, and that's normally
yeah,
where the bridge of pain is, because tier 2. Like you can have a bit. Oh, I got a tier 2. I finished 30th in under 23 Rare Pro this week. I'm going to get something maybe a wee bit fun. But if you get a tier 2 that's absolutely cack, and then normally you look up the leaderboard, you see the quality of the tier 1s that came out at that time, you then think, well, I didn't really miss out on as much there,
yeah,
And then you
yeah,
see the stars, and you're like, hold on, that looks like a guy that was tier 1 last year, or that looks like a guy that was tier 2 uh, 3 months ago, or something. I don't know. I'm exaggerating, but so I think it's maybe getting back to that a bit more, where if you land and forget the star category, right? Because it's the few, it's the small percentages of people that hit those categories. But when you hit the tier 2, you hit maybe the top end of tier 3, you think this guy could make a difference. This guy could help me at the weekend. And again, to go back to the ratio thing, if you do build your first team out, and I've got videos on the YouTube channel that go into some more detail, like how to build your squad and club philosophy and all that kind of caper. You'll find them dead easy. They're in playlists. But if you've got that one goalkeeper in 3-3-3, and if they're all, let's say you're playing cap 240, but they're all challenger based, as soon as you get another goalkeeper in, you might actually have 2-ish teams there already, anyway, organically, without you having to do too much work. So I do feel having yourself, like you do want to straddle a few bridges where winning that tier 2, winning that tier 3, all of a sudden, oh wow, I've now got 5 defenders and 5 mids. I've still got the 3 forwards because maybe forwards are harder to come by, whatever, I don't know. And then making so you want the tiers to get back to that level where you can advance your club by finishing 50th. It makes a difference by getting into the top 100, by pulling a tier 3 in, tier 2 we've mentioned a few times. So I think it's hopefully more than that, and maybe there's less of them paid out on the regular, increase, kind of, no, I don't want to say the word scarcity, but increase maybe the prestige. They're
yeah,
a wee bit more exclusive. They're not as readily available, because although we know the scarcity of them, but premium items in general, collectibles, we talk about a lot. My kind of adjacent experience with them on this podcast once in a while. But like, if people say something's a special edition and then it gets the same amount of issues as a regular edition would, like normally you produce 10,000 cards of Messi, and then you say, oh, we've got a special Messi card that's coming out. There's only 10,000 of them available, but how special is it? It's just different, it's not special, So again, with Sorare, it's a bit different because Kimmich scores better than other people, Mbappe scores better than other people. So there's a bit of that comes into it. But with things that are more expensive, like it's not just scarcity, but availability is also something that maybe they want to tweak, ever so slightly.
yeah,
Like they're less readily available.
yeah. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out, but we'll be expecting some kind of announcement on that, I think, in the next few weeks, won't we? Because it feels like it was a little while ago that they mentioned that, and we've had like a few pitch notes, but no major updates since. So, yeah, I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that, and hopefully an update on what's happening with the K League as well. But
Yeah.
Quinny, we have covered a lot of ground today. We've managed to have a good old chinwag about all sorts, ranging from moves in and out of the transfer market, moves in and out of your gallery, my gallery, and yeah, we even had a little bit of end product to discuss, so that was nice. And I'll be hoping for a bit this weekend. Quinny, have you got any particular fixture on the game week upcoming that is picking your fancy this week?
So I am mad excited about a lot of games this game week, right? I'll say this to now. I put a tweet out earlier, right? But I'm planning this weekend. I've got 0 wins at the moment, but I'm planning on going from 0 to 15 this week on Rivals, and I'm only going to do games I'm watching, only games I've got cards in. I'm not stipulating that, but it probably will be. And I'm going for it this week. I'm kind of, so there's 15 games I've got my eye on. Let's say for this weekend.
That is yeah, I saw your tweet about that. That's pretty interesting. I'll be intrigued to see if you manage to do that 15 in a row. I don't know about, I mean, on the subject of rivals, I've just actually got a notification there that Bilal Bayazit has made an error that's resulted in a goal, and they're now 1-0 down. So
Yeah.
I managed to kill off my streak, my 7-win streak. Do you know what I've realised? and I'm not gonna play rivals with any teams that I've got cards of, because this week,
Really?
yeah, the other
Not you
night
too, Stish. Not you too.
when Bayern played the other night, obviously I've got Kimmich, Kane, and Musiala, and I thought 3 rare cards, bang, they're going in. Put them in there with Neuer and Guerrero. Good lineup, right?
Yeah.
Captain Kimmich, he's got a boost, all of that. I got lined up against someone who had 4 limited cards, pretty much the same lineup, except they had Sané instead of Musiala. Or no, Sané instead of Kane, sorry. So pretty strong. Wiped the floor with me. And I'm like, the value of my rares doesn't hold up against anyone who's playing with limiteds, but I get lumped in with them all the time. So I find I have much more success only playing the games where there's a lot less interest on the platform from people. So not the big high ticket games. And yeah, like them sort of like weird little fixtures that kick off at like 2 a.m, and I'll go in there and I'll pick out the teams. Hopefully, a time when, if I'm awake at like 1 a.m, which is rare, but that's my tip. Pick the games that less people are playing. Do not use any of your cards, because you will only get matched up against people who've got loads of limiteds and will wipe the floor with you. Unless you've got 5 players, don't use cards, because you will just get matched up and you'll absolutely drubbed. And that every game I've lost on rivals has been like that. I've used a card and I've got like matched up with someone who's got 4 limiteds or something like that, or 5 limited.
I hate to ruin this story, Stish, but I've just went and had a wee peek. You beat that guy.
What one? Well,
The
the Bayern
Munich guy. You beat him by 30 points. Yep.
I'm going back in. Well,
I went to look at this, right?
right?
Because this is a topic of conversation over towards the end of the show. This is a wee bonus section for anyone who's still hanging on with us here.
Yeah.
But this is a thing I've been saying with rivals. The best 5 is the main thing that matters, right? So when you were telling me there that you had rares and you had limiteds and there was only one player different, I was really excited to see how it all kicked out. And you're dead right. You both had common Neuer. You had you had common Guerrero. He had limited Guerrero. So his Guerrero outscored you by 20 points, right?
Mm.
You had rare Captain Kimmich. He had limited Kimmich. You outscored him by 18 points. You had rare Kane. He had Captain Limited Kane. He beat you by 6. And then on the final spot, you had Musiala on 71 rare. He had a common 56. You beat him by 30 points, right? But you got 40 on Tiki Taka, and he only got to 20 on All Out Attack. So the best 5 players, if we're to look at it now for Bayern, right? You're picking the goalkeeper, you're picking Guerrero. The best midfielder is Kimmich. The best forward is Sané. And then the second best mid is going to be Goretzka. Now, I don't know if all of them would have been pluggable together, but I dare say if you had that lineup, limited, rare, common, anything in between, you'd have been really hard to beat.
Yeah. So when I last looked at that, I was losing, so I kind of put it to bed. I didn't realize I did actually win that one, but yeah, that's handy to know. But yeah, with a lot of the other games I've played, I found that I'm better off playing games. I very rarely lose games where I've got no cards, whereas I've lost a lot of games where I've got cards. That's obviously the point I was trying to make about the Bayern one is actually false, and I did win that. But yeah, I found with I've lost a lot of games where I've played with cards because I'm getting matched up with someone who's got a full lineup in limited. But like you said, it does boil down to play the best team. Because then if you do have cards, but you've still got the 5 best players, then you might have an advantage, I think. If you've got 5 limiteds, you're probably going to win. Unless you get matched up against someone who's got 5 rares, I guess, right? But can't say I've been matched up. The only time I've ever seen myself matched up with someone who's got like 5 rares or better is when I like play a friendly match against someone like Nanzo. And it's like, oh, I've been matched up against Nanzo. I've probably just lost every time to him. But yeah, when I saw that Bayern fixture, but yeah, I must have nicked that near the end. Maybe the tiki taka was what won it in the end for me. But I remember looking at that at the time with probably about 10 minutes to play, and I was quite far behind. So I think that maybe the tiki taka was what won it for me in the end. That extra 20 odd points, 30 points. that last 10 minutes must have made the difference for me, because I was definitely losing the last time I looked at it, and I put it to bed. But yeah, interesting. I've been, yeah, I'll be involved. I have noticed as well, for anyone that's listening, there's been a few retweets on the Sorare Twitter feed. A little bit of more bonus injury time here. Sorare have been retweeting some sort of like community driven competitions that are kind of like based around Rivals. So if you do play Rivals and you're looking at it this weekend, there is a few where you can potentially win like League on like signed stuff. I think there's a French user who has like a 3-game tournament. So if you challenge him across the Lyon, Marseille, and PSG games, everyone's like 3 scores from those games goes into a leaderboard, and then they'll pick like the top 2 places will get a signed shirt, a normal shirt, and then like a Sorare hat. So there's a few of those floating about. So do keep your eye on the Sorare Twitter feed and see what they're reposting, because there's a lot of these little sort of like mini tournaments that are being kind of micromanaged by other sort of content creators, I'd say, or influencers in the Sorare community. So who knows, maybe me and Quinny need to give them a knock on the door and get a bit of end product rival special on the go. What do you reckon, Quinny?
Yeah, I think we could do that for sure. I've got a lot of stuff lined up for the weekend. So Stishy boy, the door's always open if you want to gate crash. I'll probably be doing some Sunday night prime time again. I like that late Sunday slot. It just feels like people are available to watch and maybe to join in on the stream as well. But yeah, definitely get some end product rival stuff on the go for sure.
Definitely. Well, best of luck, Quinny, and everyone listening. I hope you have a banging weekend. Make sure you're locked into Quinny's YouTube. For the duration, he's going to be doing a bit of marathon streaming. It sounds like some proper like David Blaine in a glass box vibes going on this weekend in the studio, with Quinny locked well and truly into the matrix of Sorare Rivals. So good luck, Quinny. Hopefully you can make it 15 in a row. Yeah, and then I think if you do that, you need to throw the gauntlet down to everyone in the community to see if they can better it on a live stream. So I am going to be rooting for you, mate. I'll be keeping an eye out for that end product.
Let's get it.
All right, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers, everyone.